Today, I'm speaking with Grant Shaddick, CEO of Tella. Tella, if you don't know about it, is a recording and editing tool that's totally cloud-based. It's kind of like Loom, but way more high quality, and it handles a lot of the post-production for you and gives you way more options. The videos you produce with Tella look a lot better. Um, I've used Tella for a number of years now, and I'm starting to use it a lot more as I move towards more off-the-cuff productions because I want to get stuff out there faster and I want to be more connected and not necessarily having to script. And it's been a really delightful experience. There's a lot of small user experiences and interactions that they've done really well there that are just really interesting from a video point of view. Video production tools tend to be underserved in terms of like user experience. They tend to sort of leave a lot of complexity up to the editor, but as you'll hear in this interview, there's a lot to be solved in video production, and Grant and the team are doing really well. They think a lot about user experience, and they toe that really hard balance between enabling very high or quite high quality video production while keeping the tool simple. And we talked about that balance throughout our kind of conversation. We also touched on the kind of deeper capabilities that LLMs are giving them, including their upcoming editing agent, which is due soon, I think, or whatever you want to call it, magic tool. We get into that as well, talking about how we name these things. We talked about his thoughts on competitors, like related tools like Loom, Descript, Underlord, Riverside even, which I'm recording this in. We talked about the platform itself, like the architecture, the back end, what it actually takes to record, edit, and share all in the cloud, and the future of the platform as it relates to kind of automation and generative AI. And I guess just the future place of video in the workplace, some really interesting thoughts. My favorite quote from this interview was something Grant said, which is that the video is the prompt. And I won't explain that now, just as a little teaser for you, but it made me reflect a lot on the future role of video in relating to AI. Right now, we're all of us typing into LLMs, some of us are dictating into LLMs, but very soon we're going to be sending videos to AI, and they're going to have a lot more context. And I think Tella's going to play a really interesting role here, as are many other tools. So as always, if you enjoy the show and you have a little bit of time to leave a quick rating on Spotify or iTunes, that really helps. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Grant Shaddick. So Grant, in the beginning, you guys kind of positioned yourselves a little bit as a kind of more high quality alternative to Loom, maybe. You can say whether that's true or not. I certainly remember that in the early days, but I know that this has shifted over the years. And since obviously your new round of funding and stuff like that, there's a kind of different vision I heard you speaking about on an update a while back. So I love the sound of it, and I'd love us to start off there. Like, where is Tella at now? What's the kind of grand vision for it? And then we can get into the kind of the practicalities of how you're achieving it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a stereotype now that a lot of software companies are kind of looking at their futures and thinking, how does this change with AI and at least the tools that you can get out of AI, and we're no different in that sense. But we think we have, I guess, a pretty unique angle there where since the beginning, our whole thing was like, how can we make creating something high production that like sort of has a bit more aesthetic quality and production quality to it, as quick as you can make a Loom. And that has been, we've solved that by trying to do interesting user experience things, technology things, make the process faster, simplify the tools, restrict the set of use cases and the sort of possible options that a person can work with or output to. But all of that becomes all of those things we can solve a lot of those problems a lot better with AI. And it probably is going to be the single biggest step towards like realizing this vision of being able to create a high production video in the time it takes to make a Loom ever in our history. So that's sort of where we're at today. We're now trying to basically eliminate the whole editing step as much as we can and leave that purely as like an optional thing for people. So we want to give you the video 80, 90, 100% done, and then the user can say like, do I want to tweak this, adjust this? Do I want to add my own personality here? But you're not kind of starting with this sort of blank canvas or these raw recordings and then having to figure out how you get it to that point of like the high production thing to launch your new product or start your YouTube channel or do your online course.
One of the things that I think the average person, myself a lot included in this, the average tech savvy person even has is like there's an assumption that like when you bring AI into a product, it's just like generative text or like generate an image. But the raw power of LLMs and any other kind of model that is being used by you guys is so powerful for creating so many features that you don't think of on the surface as AI. So maybe you can talk a little bit about like what you've done with AI right now beyond just the sort of like auto edits. You have a really great feature for like cutting buffers, cutting ums, rs, like Descript or wherever. Maybe you could just say like where you've taken that further, what's going on under the hood, and also what you're thinking about with this technology that you can see doing so much in the future.
Yeah. So the first a dabble into this, attempt into this was some of these like auto cut features, auto trimming features, which you can probably comfortably brand as AI, but that stuff's been around a while now, and it wasn't a stretch for us to implement ourselves. There wasn't really any head scratching. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, we've got the transcript and we've got the waveform. There are the silences. There are the ums. That stuff was pretty straightforward, and customers love that because of that. It's a great micro example of what all of this technology does, is where you say like, oh, one button and I've saved myself a ton of hassle and potentially 10, 15, 20 minutes of work. But what we are working on now, this isn't live, but it's our first bet on this. The first feature that we're really kind of rethinking with this is it should be going live in the next month or so, an early version of that. We're basically taking that idea a step further, where instead of just cutting ums and ahs and things like that, we'll be making editorial decisions, where it'll be like, should you start your video with your camera on as the main shot, and then when should you transition to your camera and your screen, and then when cutaways to just your camera again a good moment to when's that a good moment to do so, and then other more subtle things like, let's emphasize the screen a bit more and use a slightly more creative or different layout at that moment. The whole thing is like, how can we keep what we're trying to do is we're trying to say like, how can we take all of that really hard effort to like make a video engaging throughout for the whole duration, and do that for our customers. So that's the first thing that really we're spending a lot of time on at the moment. We still haven't quite landed on a name for this yet. I suppose our working title is auto layout. It's basically like, we'll apply your layouts throughout the video.
You're going to call it an agent, Grant?
We're not going to call it.
Tella agent.
No, we haven't. I don't know.
Sorry, I'm so cynical.
We've kind of got this like roadmap of like the core sets of the core features within the product that we'll then kind of like rethink from this approach, and then maybe we'll package it all together, and then that'll be our editing agent or something like that. But for now, it's just going to be auto edit, magic edit.
It's so funny, like the way I'm not cynical. I'm just like laughing at it because we're going through that exact same process. Like, do we call it AI? Do we call it an agent? Do we come up with some like other name? And it's interesting to see other companies like, what are they going to call it? What's Salesforce going to call the AI? Like the little, obviously they have their little character and stuff like that. But I wonder whether it's going to be like that in 10 years, whether it's just going to be like, everyone's going to be like, do you remember when we used to call certain parts of software certain names, and actually now it's just the software? I don't know. It's a funny old process we're going through.
The thing I sort of come back to that we learned a lesson of in the early days of Tella is when we started it, we were like, we need to make Tella sort of different and have like our personality throughout the whole product. And so we're like, we're not making videos, we're making stories. And people don't make video clips, they make scenes. And people would use the product, and like we talk to them and they would be like, oh, so like, yeah, I was trying to make the video the other day, and we're like, it's a story. And they were like, oh, I was like recording, so I recorded the second clip, and we're like, you mean the scenes? And like we just kept butting up like against this, where people would just call it what they expect to call it, and we had our fancy name that we were trying to ram down down their throats, and like they just weren't into it. And so like one day we were just like, let's just change the names, like their videos and their video clips, and like we've never looked back since. And so I think probably um there'll be some, maybe we'll be looking at these things like, magic edit or whatever, whatever the sort of like common term for these AI features is today, and thinking, oh, you're going to call it magic edit as well, we're going to call it that as well. But in the end, that may be just what customers and users expect.
Yeah, it's like like people are establishing patterns. Like Slack established so many patterns of software and like interaction that is now just like the paradigm. And so, and I can't think of other examples off the top of my head. So maybe it's just going to be that these things will just have names, and then those names will stick, and there's no point reinventing that name.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm just riffing. I don't know the
Go,
the
yeah.
real history, but like, even a word like upload, like it's, upload to the cloud, like
Mm.
that is something that is just like terminology. That's just common terminology. But at some point, that must have been like calling your cloud service and your cloud feature or whatever. And some people would have called it the cloud, and other people might have called it like, um, I don't know. They would have come up with some other weird term, and like that is maybe the equivalent of like what Glide and Tella and other companies are going through when they implement their generative AI feature, and they're like, "Are we going to call this like the magic thing, or the auto thing, or the something agent?" And yeah, at some point, this will all converge, and we'll be like, "Yeah, it's that, or it's this."
Yeah. And it's interesting, those moments as well. We're really going on a tangent here, but like I watched a talk the other day by Sari Azut or Azout, I can't pronounce her second name. And it was a talk about like she called it humans are un-LLMable. Can't even say that. Never said that out loud. Um, and she's basically pulling back the history to like the invention of the term artificial intelligence. And I loved what she did in the talk. She just changed the phrase to be collective intelligence,
Mm,
which just like helped me really see and value so much more what AI actually is.
yeah,
Which is kind of really, really lovely. Just a side note there, but like
yeah.
names are so defining. And she kind of like talked about that. Like if we had called it collective intelligence, everyone's frame on this would be so much more human centric and like warm. But artificial is like this very cold thing that's like far away and is going to take over us, you know?
I mean, again, I'm no my extent of understanding LLMs and artificial intelligence is, trying to hack together what we're trying to do, and listening to the rest of the AI bro podcasts, like everyone else. But like, um, the collective intelligence seems like a better term for where things are at today, in the sense that LLMs are these massive,
It's a good
masses
point. Yeah. At some
of
point, maybe it won't be. Yeah.
yeah. And what we're still maybe looking, they keep saying like, have the LLMs come up with something truly novel? Have they made scientific discoveries? And like, that seems like that's where the real intelligence thing is. And right now it's just this really, really great, autocomplete on collective intelligence. So yeah, maybe it's more than just naming there, but there might be some truth in that too.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to weave back through the tangents that we just came in, and just go back to the magic editor or whatever you guys are calling it. Um, is it just for now going to be like auto layout, or is it how much of the other parts of the editing process is it going to touch? Like the dream for me has always been to have a bunch of clips to drop them in essentially like a deep research experience for video, and let that thing process a lot of things. If anything, just like create a library of like organized B-roll and assets for me, but like ideally like come up with a couple of edits. Is that like anywhere on the horizon, or maybe not the dropping in thing, but it'd be good to get a kind of perspective of where you're at now and then where you think
Yeah.
this could go in the future.
Yeah. So things like B-roll and like additional assets like titles and things like that, they are totally new features for us, but still part of the direction. One of the reasons that we've held back so much on adding titles, for example, is um, when I was saying like how we approach building this and trying to get people to a high production result without, in the speed of, recording a Loom, is that anytime we would add something that felt like we would be taking a step back towards traditional video editing user experience, it felt like the next thing we add would then just take us further and further away from being able to do that. And stuff like adding text layers on a timeline really yeah, it really is like a big step towards like traditional video editing, approaches and concepts. And so we've always been like, one day we'll figure out how we can do this automatically or like without needing a timeline. And the same with B-roll. And so I think we're now much more interested in adding that stuff pretty soon. Now that we can probably automate the adding of it. So back to your original question, besides the dropping in of the clips at this stage, but like you record a bunch of clips, we want to be able to give you the layouts edited, the trims, pull out your mistakes. That's another thing that we're working on at the moment. So if you just like start your video, say, "Hey, it's Grant here." Oh shit, and then want to cut that out, and then
I never do that. I don't need that feature.
and so we just want to like let you record if you want, and then like we'll surface that little mistake and say you can get rid of this. Yeah, so layouts, trims, B-rolls, titles, potentially music, that kind of thing. There's, in the end, when we talk to our customers, it's sort of like, I love this latest thing. Here's the final thing that I'm still doing in Premiere or this other tool that I use. And usually their main request is like, give me that thing in Tella so that I can have the whole workflow in Tella instead of just this extra step. But when we talk to customers, like the number of things that people still need to maybe use another tool for to get their result is getting less and less. And we're just kind of like on a path to trying to absorb as much of that as possible. I don't think there'll ever be like it'll never end, but we're just sort of like, what is that next thing? Does it make sense to bring into Tella? And can we do it in a way that keeps the process efficient? And with AI, it's just going to make it a much easier job for us to be able to do that. Whereas in the past, we really had some moments where we're like, how the hell are we going to like, music is another one where we've sort of been like, if we add music and like adding it onto the track and like lining up the duration of it. But now with generative audio, you can just have a video that's a certain duration and then generate a perfectly aligned backing track for it like that. And that could probably just happen totally in the background as soon as, or potentially as soon as the user's done with their recording.
Yeah, it must be so interesting thinking about the short term and the long term of a tool, of like enhancing the tool to be able to edit for humans who have taste and more context on what the subject matter is. At this stage, I imagine you're like actually just focused way more on like, the first 200 feet in front of you. But like in terms of where this goes, have you done much thinking about like how you're going to solve those further down the line editing problems? For example, a really simple one that just came up in my head and prompted this was what you said about like cutting the bad take or whatever. And like the last podcast I did was with Justin Poor, who's the producer of Cleo Abrams videos. She's a big YouTuber, and he was saying like, Cleo will do like 5 takes of one short, and then they'll choose the right one. And I was like, oh, interesting. Cleo hands that off to you, and they're like, yeah, we decide which is the best take. And I was like, okay, I always choose my last take because I always think the last one is like better practice. And it's like, how would the AI choose that? Anyway, back to the first question, really, which is just like, how far along have you thought about this kind of like this large problem set?
Yeah, it might sound a bit strange where I guess we really are what makes us different is how focused we are on screen recording, and will be for the sort of medium term. And so within that, it what I'm most interested in and think we're in a really good position to do relative to I guess more agnostic video editing tools is we have this very constrained set of use cases and the types of output. And even today, I feel like we have a pretty good handle on the scope, even the maximum scope of the most highest production version of those. And I think the path to being able to automate a big part of that workflow. I think where it gets tricky, and you do then get into these things which end up feeling much more subjective, and you get into these interesting questions. That happens when you are a more agnostic video editing software that like has no preference for use case or just says, look, we support everything. If you're Final Cut Pro or Premiere Pro, there's no, they don't have any really opinion about what you're making with them. They kind of give you the tool for anything and everything to make any kind of video that you possibly want. And if they max out on that, then they point you to After Effects or something to do an extra bit there. But for us, it's very, very constrained to screen recording, and that means it feels like we have we have a clearer path to being able to just do the absolute best job and do a lot of make a lot of these editorial decisions for our customers. And I guess the other thing as well is there's a difference. I think sometimes there's a difference in working with truly, I don't mean this in a negative way, but truly creative people, where people are like a video producer or a video editor, and they come from that background, versus someone where the video is a much more functional thing, where they're like, look, I've got this new product that we launched. I just need the best demo out there, or I've just uncovered this new thing that I want to teach my audience. I just need the best course out there. There's a lot of that process in the middle, which they are using Tella. They're handing that off to us to help them with as much of that as possible. And so we still need to have an opinion on this internally and still give our customers control over it. But that's sort of how we think about this. And then there's definitely some of these other gray area issues or questions with video editing that I'm kind of feel like we're not going to have to worry too much about in the short term.
That's a great answer, and that clarifies a lot for me. Thank you. So maybe to clarify for me even further, really, maybe you could talk a little bit about where you think your target customer is and how you're serving them, just to dive into what you said a bit more there. And also maybe like just give context as to, like, presumably you're following what Descript do and what they're doing with Underlord and stuff like that. Like, yeah, are you parallel with them? Are you kind of like veering off? Like, I know that they're not screencast solely. Maybe that would be helpful to talk about.
Yeah, Descript is an interesting one because like they probably are the pioneers in the space, like their whole text edit by text. They were I don't know if they're the first, but they definitely did the best job of marketing that and bringing that to the market.
I think they were also some of the first, at least that I experienced, in terms of like generating models of your own voice. I remember doing that like way back in 21 or something. I don't know. It was so weird. Everyone was like, that's crazy. And now it's just like, whatever.
Yeah, they acquired that company called Lyrebird, I think it was called, that could do this. It was, when they launched, it was really incredible and really, really inspiring. How they were also, again, and what was interesting is that they were really rethinking some of these core parts of video and audio editing. Where I think it's interesting relative to us is like they have rethought a lot of these things over the years and come up with something really great. But it still feels like quite a professional, quite a pro tool in a lot of ways. And I think that probably comes from their origin as a podcast editor and an audio editor. And I feel like the DNA of that is still within the product, even though they are now trying to simplify the whole editing process. Underlord giving people edits, and so relative to Descript, there is definitely this parallel, at least with what they're doing these days. But again, like we are still trying to be as constrained as possible to screen recording as the primary use case. And the reason for that is that I just think, like, the reason we started Tella is like it felt like the future of video was going to be like the future of video and the present day of video for the real world has been solved, or like has just there's enough people worrying about that. And the iPhone is just this incredible machine, and all the insane mobile apps that have just turned capturing the real world, editing that, making great content out of that. That's all solved and is now just sort of getting further and further optimized. But I don't think there is enough attention on taking the stuff that happens on people's screens and then turning that into the most engaging content it can be, or the content that people need. And so yeah, we're just kind of like, let's just focus on the screen recording and do everything we can and support all the use cases that make sense with the screen recording as the origin. And what we're sort of riding on at the moment is like, there's now like a sort of a new renaissance in software. Is like everyone's got all these incredible new tools and are shipping all these amazing things, and you need something to be able to tell the story of that. And so, yeah, that's sort of like the difference there between us and Descript. I think today is like we have a lot more focus on the screen recording, but I think that there are some principles around like trying to simplify the process that are common there.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying about constraints here, and I totally appreciate it. I guess like as one of those many people who come to you like being like, "Hey, you could do this," or like, "What about this?" and like, "Have you thought about this?" and you're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, constraints." I think it's because you guys just executed a bunch of things so well. I'm like, "Oh, finally, someone's making a tool that like makes these tiny micro interactions and like the speed of cloud editing and stuff like that so much quicker." Like the thing that like the aha or like beautiful interaction moment that totally sold me on like Tella as a product was the little recorder that hovers there, right? Like you just hit record, you finish record, and then you can hit record again, and it goes to a separate clip, and then you can preview. And it seems so simple, but like the most annoying interaction for me with Loom is recording, which seems ridiculous. Like the every time I record a Loom video, I get frustrated because like it doesn't like the screen doesn't come up, or like it chooses the wrong settings. And then after every single video, it fires you off to like the video. I'm like, I don't want to watch it yet. Maybe I want to record another one. Like, so I guess I wish more tools had that. Even going back to the OG like ScreenFlow, like that. So maybe we could talk a little bit about design and like and constriction in design and like the editing experience and how you guys approach that. Um, uh, yeah, where does it all start? The design side of stuff. Are you guys in Figma? I know you have a. I feel like making a joke about using Sketch or something because I know you guys were big in supporting that tool back in the day or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
where does design start for you?
Yeah, just on that, we previous startup that Michiel, my co-founder, and I worked on was a Sketch plugin. But design at Tella has been in Figma day one. Where does it start though? Oh, yeah, in the early days, it was just I don't know. There was no process. It was just kind of like total chaotic freestyle and shipping. But today I think we have a bit more of a structured process. We've just brought on our first full-time in-house designer just this
Cool.
month. Prior to that, it was just me doing this amongst in between everything else.
All of the
Um,
other hats that you wear.
yeah, I loved doing the product design, but I was felt like I was reaching the limit of my power, and and like to learn something new, or try and like improve your sort of skill in an area to pull a particular type of design off, was just coming at a cost of like all the other quite important things of running a company. So it felt like a good time to bring someone on and push it further than I've been able to. I think the design process, there's a few different, like we sort of will get feedback from customers, and if they're like, I want this, a lot of the time, like we just don't overthink that, and it's just like, yeah, let's give them that. So there's a lot of stuff that is just that. And we will think it through, but we try not to pretend like there are things that need more thought than they do. And then there are other things where we really are. It feels like we're trying to rethink something, or it's clear that we need to rethink something from wherever the inspiration comes from, whether it's a customer or something we have seen. Yeah, then it's into Figma. My process was like my personal design process is pretty hi-fi. I in an earlier part of my life wanted to be a graphic designer, and then decided to go to business school or whatever.
And you did, just for
Um,
context for everyone, you did primarily product management, although like a whole
yep,
load of areas. Yeah.
yep, primarily product management. And so my first product design job was Tella. In the beginning, it was horrendous, but I think I gotten gotten okay
That's
in the
good.
last little while. But yeah, so I kind of got to like fulfill this dream of finally being a designer. I just had to start a company and raise venture capital to be able to do it. But the reason I liked graphic design when I was younger is because I really liked drawing. Like I was the drawing kid who would draw pictures and copy, draw Dragon Ball Z and stuff. And so I was very good at copying stuff. Like if I could see something, I could like recreate it exactly. And that's what I do with design. I'll just like see something and try and recreate it, or see a style and recreate it. And whether it's just purely the sort of the aesthetic side of a user interface, or there's some more of the flow or the user experience, like that's my design process, is trying to find other people who've done something well, or that translates, and then recreating it for our purpose. It doesn't always mean like what is the other video app or software, B2B SaaS or whatever that's done it. Like I'd say I'd try and look at like a wider range of inspiration, and then figure out the version of that makes sense for us. Going back to your point around the Mac app, the Tella Mac app recorder, where you can just like start and stop and start and stop. We just took that from TikTok. That was like, we would play with the mobile recording apps and be like, this is so much nicer to be able to just like push this button, record your clip, push it again. And then like you can create quite an elaborate clip, but like there's no friction of like, you can just stop and then start. Like it just is so simple. And like, I think that interaction and experience works so much better on mobile. But I think we did a pretty good job of bringing an experience similar to that to the desktop.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
like
that's an
that
example where
classic
we just,
experience of where you have like way more innovation in mobile design in certain areas because of that constraint, and then you bring it over to desktop and you're like, oh, like why were we not thinking of it like that? And it's because it's a blank canvas, literally a desktop, and we're all a bit inefficient and uncreative on blank canvases sometimes.
we have a small group of customers who are like, can you please make the Mac app recorder full screen? Can you make it so I can make it like take up, kind of like we're in Riverside right now and you have this full screen recording experience. Same if you use Tella on the web, we have a
Oh,
full
okay.
screen recording experience. But the Mac app is like this little floating thing that sort of looks portrait roughly the size of kind of like a phone. And we've always said, no, we just should keep it that size. But there's a group of people that kind of want it to be this much more immersive thing. And maybe there's a future where we do that. But at the moment, it's like, if we did make it this big thing, then it's sort of like, well, then there's a lot more real estate for us to be thinking about, a lot more features that we
But
could
what's the
probably.
reasoning? I'm just trying to understand, like, why do you need anything other than what you have? Because
Well,
surely it's just like get the thing recorded, then go to the editor.
it usually comes from needing from having a 2-screen setup. So if you have one screen which has got your presentation or your product or whatever it is that you're recording, and then you have a second screen which is your studio in a sense, where you can kind of monitor yourself, see the audio levels and things like that, and you have that off
I see.
screen.
Okay, fine.
We designed the Tella Mac app not for that as the primary thing, where most people just have one screen and needed a little floating thing that could still give them that same preview of your camera, see your audio coming through, quickly be able to control the recording without like needing to change contents, switch windows and things like that, without it being disruptive to whatever else it is that you're presenting or sharing on screen.
Comes back to that tension that you mentioned multiple times about like the difference between the people who are using it, who are like more like video pros, and the people who I assume, maybe I'm wrong, you're primarily focused on because it's a larger segment. And that seems to like define a lot of, I imagine that defines a lot of your product discussions and roadmap. And there's a lot of maybe a bit of tension there. Maybe you could talk more generally about like when you go to the editor today, the kind of some of the big or core decisions you've made of things to do or to not do in there. So one like feature request I've never sent into you guys, I hope maybe I did actually in the early days, I can't remember. Anyway, was like, oh, I wish I could see like the other things I've done, like the zooms while I'm in this view. And of course, with this context, just a little bit of context, you know why that's not possible, because you'd end up with that dreaded like multiple layers, which immediately screams like video
Yeah.
production.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, maybe you could talk about that and like on what you feel or you would place bets on will not change in the editor and why.
Yeah. Well, I hope we never do a multi-track video editor. Like, I really, really hope we don't do that.
You don't want to do
Um,
After Effects for the web. Why not?
there's other people doing that, you know. There's other great other great apps that are trying to simplify that. But yeah, no, I think the decision not we in the very early version of Tella, we had this sort of multi-track thing with lots of little layers floating around in this like representation of time and everything. And it was just I can't describe I can't really put into words how just uh, bad of a job we did of it, and like how difficult it was to just do that really well or do that. We sort of thought, oh, this is what a video tool should be, but we had this other idea that we were still trying to pursue, and they just like weren't going. The more we worked on it and the more things we added and changed it just never felt like we were going to converge to like, oh, this is the simple way to like make a video. And so the Michiel actually made the call, which was just like, let's just get rid of the timeline. Like, what happens if we get rid of the timeline and you can't do all that stuff? And the only thing you can do is you can just record. What happens? And I had this sort of existential crisis where I was like, oh my God, this is going to ruin everything. I think we'd been working on the product for like 6 months or, yeah, roughly about that. And yeah, we pulled the plug on it. We removed some other features and some people complained, but we also realized that actually, yeah, people were making better videos because they were finishing the videos and they were simpler and easier to make. And so you got a better result at the end of it rather than people kind of like spinning their wheels forever on like a more complicated process that we were just sort of opening up them up to with, you know, having to think about text layers and stuff like that. I spoke to a customer, a relatively new customer, a couple of days ago, and I was asking why he picked us, and he'd tried another like a he was previously using or evaluating um Kapwing, which was one of the sort of early simple browser-based video editing software. And he was like, well, Kapwing was cool because I could do a lot of stuff. But the reason I went with you guys, like I do a lot of stuff and I had a lot of tools and I could add a lot of features into my video. But he's like, the reason I went with you guys is like I made 10 videos. I attempted 10 videos on Kapwing and didn't finish any of them. And with Tella, I finished 10 video. I made and shared 10 videos
Yeah, I
with
did
you
one
guys.
yesterday as well. Like it really, the velocity. There's something about what you guys have done. It's just like, again, I think for me, it comes from that like simple interaction of record, stop, record, stop. You know, it's all going to the same place, and you can sort it out later. And I can't wait for the AI editor to make that even better, so that you know you're just like, because okay, side tangent here. I'm going to get on my little soapbox for a second because I think there's something really profound here about like communication, which maybe you'll resonate with. Is that like part of your mission, or what I see is like you're empowering people to communicate through the screen, right? Like, and the average person, I think, who you're aiming for is someone who's not necessarily used to doing that, or may not think that they can do that. And continually, what I see, especially as someone who interviews people, is like in the world, most people don't think that they can communicate well, but if you like create the right environment for them and you ask the right questions and keep them in a zone that's like quite not, which is not overwhelming,
Yep.
everyone shines. Everyone fucking
Yep.
shines. And
Yep.
and if you can then like repurpose that and keep them in that groove, just beauty comes out of it. Um, I kind of lost my thread because I got on my soapbox there,
But
but
that's totally it. Like, I'm not going to say we had, you know, the clarity of all of that in the early days, but we've sort of found that that's, you know, that is all emerged out of this process. But like the record in the early days, the recording experience, we did really have a lot of relatively strong opinions on with the web recorder, as we're like, it just should feel like you can just sit down and you push one button and then that's it, and then you can push the button to stop, and then you can start like and you can keep going like that and keep the noise out of keep as much noise out of it as possible. One early iteration we had was like, what if the recording experience was baked into the editor experience? And so like you could see part of your final video, but you could also see like you would also be recording. And we're like, that's just if you're now thinking about the step afterwards,
Like
then you're,
every Zoom call and every FaceTime ever, you can't hide, or you can on Zoom, but like every FaceTime call and WhatsApp call, you can't hide yourself. I can't believe they haven't added that feature. Like maybe it's a safety thing that's just been pushed, but like it is crazy. Yeah, like you're self-conscious the whole time. So I definitely think you shouldn't like do that whole like side editor thing because based on
well,
your
well,
goals.
well, this was even like you would see it was more like you would go into your edited version of your video like a canvas, and you would have a background, and you would have a layout already, and you would have graphics and things like that, and then the recording would just sort of like pop you into that so you would sort of like
Oh, I
be
see. So you were like already in the video recording in
you're
the
in the
timeline
final
or something.
video, so you'd be thinking
So you
about
could be
these
like
other.
pointing down to here, like this part of the screen. I see.
Yeah. And we're like, that's like if you now have to like give people this like extra spatial awareness and like thinking
Yeah.
about like how this looks, that's just too much. So just like strip it back and just make it like the most, just focus on the recording. I think one of the things that kind of made us question this, and we were like, oh, is this the right thing? It's like launched at a similar time to us and did really, really well in the early days, and we were just like nowhere. And that was their whole thing, is like you were sort of like presenting in your canvas, in your environment, um, um, and 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 sort of had all of the sort of embellishments of the final video in the recording experience. And we're like, oh, is that what they're doing really well? They've got all this hype. Maybe that's what we should have done. And we just stuck to the very simple, like, focused recorder, worry about the editing later. And that I think has paid off. So yeah, that was something that we were quite deliberate about. Um, but going back to your point around like, if you can keep it simple and fast, you can open up, you can allow people to be more expressive. The typical process for creating a video, or for a lot of videos, whether it's screen recording or not, is like you've got to record the footage, you've got to capture the footage, you've got to edit, and then you've got to like share, render, publish, that final sort of step. um, and the each of those steps has a big chunk of time associated to it, and a big chunk of like expertise and knowledge as well. I think with the publishing step, depending on what you're using, that can be quite relatively short, but it also can be quite long. The expertise needed there is pretty minimal, and so for us, we were just focused on like, how can we build the fastest possible video renderer and the fastest possible exporter, so that if you have this quite elaborately edited video, you're not sitting around for a 10, 15, 20-minute rendering or exporting step. You can just share the link instantly.
I think half of
Um,
my salary goes into waiting for renders.
yeah, the
I'm
hour,
kidding, but
the hours, the
yeah,
hours for that. Yeah.
not
Um,
true, but it's sort of true. Um,
but so
uh,
we were like, how do we compress that down to like the simplest it can be? And again, the inception of Tella was like, we're competing with Loom. How do we be as fast as Loom, but help people make high production videos? And so we kind of like trapped ourselves into this quite difficult challenge, which is like, oh shit, we have to like render quite heavily edited videos as fast as a Loom video. And a Loom video basically needs no rendering, because they capture a single stream of video with your camera imposed on the screen. And so it's like, what you record is what you get. That's a simplified version, but that's roughly the case. Whereas for us, we would have a separate camera and a screen as two separate video files. We would have the background file, and then you would have potentially all the edits and stitching together the multiple clips. And so we've had to figure out like, how do we get as close to that real-time instant sharing experience as Loom? And we're basically there. There's some room for it to be faster. So we kind of figured that out. And the next thing now is like the editing step. The editing step, you jump into the editor. We kind of give you a starting point, but then, yeah, you're like, okay, cool. How do I make the whole video engaging throughout? It's like, okay, you got to go through, you might have to spend 15 minutes on your 5-minute video going through and changing all the layouts, picking all the shots, fixing all the mistakes and things like that. How can we compress that down to where it's basically, no time as well? And so the experience for someone should just be to sit down and record and just tell your stories. Show the cool thing that you've made, or like tell them like this cool idea that you've discovered. Just focus on like that fun, very human part
I'm going to
of
jump in there and actually say
yeah.
that's another beautiful thing about the recorder that I didn't even mention, which is like the reset button, the retry button, and you're immediately recording, or the immediate delete button. Like these are such tiny little things, and you added them, and it's drastically changed my approach to iteration. Like I'm not like precious about like the dreaded countdown that all these screen recorders do. I know you probably got. I can't remember whether I turned it off or whether you had that setting, but like I just always turn that off because it's just like you want a conversation, like I will just start again, or I'll rephrase, or I'll like go back and rephrase it. I don't be like, oh, sorry, can we pause the conversation for a second? I just need to go back and start that period. You just ruined the flow, and that's another really small thing.
I think what we are going to be able to do pretty soon as well is like recording is kind of a recording is one for a lot of people a fun thing because you can kind of just show your app and it's your moment to kind of be in the spotlight or whatever. But it is also there is a high pressure there because you feel like you need to get it right. But I think if we can kind of like build the trust with customers and with our users that like you don't need to worry about that a ton, we will help you with that in various ways, then we can kind of account for all the 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 weird quirks that people have when it comes to recording. So there are some people who like, like you and me just will hit the retry button and start again. And I just want to get the perfect take. I don't want to have to edit any stuff out. I just want like, if I'm like if I get 90% of the way through and I make a mistake, I'm just going to retry and get the whole thing. That's just my sort of personality. And there are lots of our customers that do exactly that. But then we have a lot of people who are like, I am going to record for an hour and there's going to be 10 minutes of this, which is what is going to be the final thing. And they're doing all that pausing and retrying just while the camera's running. And then they go and they cut all that stuff out. And then you get the sort of like third type, which is where people will go through the whole thing, stop the clip, start a new clip, and just do the exact same thing again, and they will then like pick the best take out of it. So there's these sort of three core flavors of how people record, and you kind of need to like there's no market. You can't really. I don't think there's a market of like we're the video tool that caters to this one type of behavior of recording because all these behaviors exist within our market, which tends to be kind of entrepreneurs and smaller businesses at the moment. And so we have to account for all of that stuff. And I think we've been able to account for some of that stuff pretty well with just the user experience choices in the recording process. And now with some of these new AI-enabled editing features, we'll be able to account for the remaining part where you can just record for an hour and you might only be using 5 minutes of that, but we'll be able to tell you that this is the 5 minutes that you're using, and you can do that without stressing because that you're going to have to go and sift through the footage to find that thing.
Yeah,
So in capturing all of that, I think however you record, you can jump into Tella, you can push the record button and just like focus on the fun part.
I really can't wait for that. So like, yeah, the reason being that like the it's that classic thing. I always say this phrase, but like, or I use this quote. I forget who said it. It's like I didn't write a short letter. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one. Like yesterday, I recorded a 20-minute tutorial because I wanted to get it done in one day. But I usually do like 3 to 4 minute tutorials. But to script, like record the voiceover to camera, then composite or put over the screencast on top of that takes 2 to 3 days. Like if you're gonna, maybe it depends on the complexity of it. Um, and I can't wait till when I can do a day like yesterday and like slightly change my presentation style and like redo bits and then ask Tella to chunk that into like the best takes and make it
Yep.
flow. And
Yep.
then it's like a 8 minute video, that'll change a ton of things, I think, like so much in terms of like the communication, just going back to that mission that you spoke about and like the future of humans communicating through video. I think it's gonna unleash a lot because if presenting and telling your story or whatever you want to call it wasn't hard enough, there's the post production on that thing, which is
Yeah.
just painful as hell. Like,
Yeah.
and just you're already thinking about it before you start speaking your first words. in the old paradigm. And
This is
the more you can change that and disrupt that, the more amazing it's going to be. And again, just going back to the big picture, like collective intelligence and stuff like that, like what's been so profound for me over the last 2-3 years of interacting with AI is Whisper, like the dictation model, and like what that's done as an interface for me speaking to language models and writing, books that I'll write in the future or whatever, just like pouring notes into them. It's just completely changed that. And video is like that. Like right now, you and I are recording. This is going to go into text. It's going to be eaten up by some language model one day. And that's value to collective consciousness. And I just love to think that what you're doing, like, sort of enables that more for all the humans who aren't doing it right now, because all of that knowledge that's just in people's heads.
Yeah, I think that's something we thought about a lot as well in the early days, and it's going to come back again, which is like a lot of people, you sort of can't build for a market that's not like there yet.
Mm.
Which is like, oh, I'm not a video creator, so it's very hard to like, or I'm not interested in this. So it's very hard to like build a product and a business to try and convert people into that. But those people will, we believe that those people will come to video, and so we have to build for the people that like sort of have that right set of needs, that at the moment. But there are a lot of people that just don't make videos because they know they have to embark on a project. Like it's like this project. Like making a video is this making making a YouTube video is a project. It's a massive task. I ask customers, how many YouTube videos are you publishing a week, and they're like, I'm aiming for one, but at the moment it's less. And we want
How
to
many
give
emails do you
people,
write a week?
yeah, yeah. And so it's like, can we get to a point where the idea of making a video has the sort of the post-production stuff, like the post-recording stuff, the editing for engagement and retaining your viewer, and helping with the story and sifting through the takes and the mistakes and things like that, with that's all just like baked in, and that that's going to be handled for you, so that you can just sit down and write an email, which is like, we don't think about all of the rest of the stuff that comes, with that. We just like have our thoughts, we put them down on paper. um, I want people to be able to have their idea or thoughts or the cool thing that they've made, and just be able to like whip open Tella, record it, and they're going to get something that will captivate people. Like this, and you can get, I'll get into sort of like the the fluffy, warm, fuzzy sort of like the good we're doing for the world is like, I've spoken to um um not cardiologists, oncologists. Now, I've spoken to an oncologist who's like, I don't know, must be late 60s or 70s or something. Works, has helped thousands, I don't know, dozens, hundreds of women with breast cancer. And he's got all this, a career's worth of knowledge. He's like, I'm turning this into a course. I've never been able to make an online
Right.
course as good as I have or as fast as I have with you guys, because like I can just sit down and focus on the content, and like I get a great
Yeah.
result at the end of it. And that's like amazing that you can kind of like enable someone with such important expertise to just put it out there and not feel like they're like, oh God, I got to make a video for this. Like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to make this look good? Are people going to buy this course, or, are they going to watch it? You can just like eliminate all that stuff and just be like, yeah, I can use talent, and it's going to like take care of all that stuff. So obviously there's the stuff we focus on, which is like helping people build software and things like that. And that's all great, but there's all like really meaningful stuff out there as well that this ends up having
Yeah, I mean, that's
some
always
small
going to be the
impact on.
case when you're building a tool that's like agnostic for what it's, or the use case that it's for. And like we have that with Glide, like, of course there are huge businesses that use it, but then there are incredible social enterprises, and charities that use it as well. And that's always fascinating. Um, One point though that I think is worth sort of not leaving aside is, you could also enable terrible content, right?
Yeah.
Because you are
Yeah.
just a tool for recording and editing at this point, which,
Yeah.
so I had a really interesting, I don't know, like it might be worth listening to if you haven't already, like with Isaac Gilley, founder of and CEO of Shuffle. which is like a tool which it does similar things, but also has this sort of period of the pipeline which is before you guys start, which is the planning, right?
Mm.
I know you've added teleprompter and stuff like that, but they have this like whole phase of like generative like planning of videos, setting you up for the right ones, and like sort of almost like as an AI director for you as the talent, really. Like you come with your context and your knowledge, and then it helps you structure it. Have you thought about that side of the pipeline at all?
Yeah, we I think back, I don't know, a couple years ago when the first um powerful models that caught everyone's attention were coming out, we were sort of like, okay, so what does this mean for us? And we're talking to a friend who works, you would say he's definitely part of the AI industry to some degree, and he's in Silicon Valley, much closer to the source of all this. And we're asking him like, what do you think? He's like, we're like, we want to do the AI editing. We want to edit the videos for people. And he was like, no, no, help people with the recording part. Help with them use AI to help with all the preparation and like the what to record and things like that. He's like that to me. He's like, that's the more interesting thing to work on. And we ignored him and like are now just doing the editing part. But I think he's still right that is like that is another that's just another challenge, another set of challenges that can be solved or improved on. Um, so yeah, we think about we sort of have that as like the next one of the next big things on the list is like how do you help with the build up to sitting down and recording. Um, if you think about I went talking about the record, edit, share sort of workflow, and we're trying to we've compressed down the sharing, we're trying to compress down the record, the editing, and then the recording would be that last sort of frontier. Is like how can you compress that down, or whatever else you bake into that recording process, the planning and the script and everything. How can you compress that down as well? So um, then you get into like I wouldn't say weirder stuff. It's not that weird anymore, but you sort of like, is it you that's recording? Is it you or is it your AI avatar that's recording? And so we think a little bit about that as well. Um, I guess for us, like jury's still like people want this stuff, but like jury's like for us is still a little bit out on it. Not that we don't believe that the technology is going to get there, or is there in some cases, but we like for now we like the idea that like the that we can use our focus on AI to enable you to still be the best version of yourself, and not like you have to create a different version of yourself or an AI version of yourself. Um, we'll have to reckon with that approach, more closely in the next, probably 12 months or whatever. But for now, we're sort of like, let's just focus on still you recording yourself, and we'll just kind of enhance you in post-production as much as we can. But yeah, there's still some open questions there for where we go with that.
Yeah, that's a funny old area, and I'm still like jury's out for me as well on it. Like it does. I don't have a clear opinion on it because I see the value and I know billions of people will be interested in it, and I know it will add a lot of. But there's also an uncomfortable sort of like question I have, which is like, why is everyone who's interested in this focusing so much on the stuff to create the fake human as opposed to all the things around the human that the human needs, i.e., us? It's a funny one, and I think it's sort of like there's something in it for me. We're getting a bit spiritual or something here about like people not having enough faith in their own humanity or their own like potential or the potential for all of us to do amazing things.
Mm,
Maybe I'm reading into it too much. I'm sure
mm.
everyone could argue with that, but there's something about that there where it's like we're sort of like forgetting who we are by faking better versions of ourselves or something. I don't know.
I wonder if I wonder if I mean, I'm sure someone's already thought of this, I guess, but like the AI podcast, like would this
To be
would
clear to everyone, we're not real. This is all fake.
yeah, this is all Gen AI. But would you do this if it was not you and it was not me, and you were just like, I am now like I'm going to be talking with Grant, the founder of Tella, and it's AI Jack and AI Grant that do that. Like maybe that'll be a thing, but it sort of feels like, well, what's the point? Like what like why
Yeah, but then
why
I
make
was
that?
on the way into work. I was listening to Notebook LM, which had all of the notes about you in it, Like I was
Right.
cycling along the sea, listening to these two people who were like really getting some of the points I'd put in there or some things
Mm,
I'd found. And this was
mm,
so early on this stuff.
mm.
So again, I'm arguing with myself and you're like saying the other side is like, I'm so conflicted. Again, jury's still
Yeah.
out, as you said. You said it's I think
Yeah.
there'll be a place for both. But the weird thing right now is like the idea that someone can repurpose you without your permission as
Yeah. I mean,
AI or like fake stuff. And until we get some solution, whether it's like I don't know, whatever it's Sam Altman's been working with, like WorldCoin or whatever, some kind of like global verification that this
mm,
is human and it's
yeah.
integrated into the digital world. There's still a nervousness in me about that. Like I remember at Glide, one of our like early experts thought that they could just like take out one of our videos of me and like turn it into German and stuff like that. And I had to be like, sorry, we're not doing this. Like, please take it down, because it was just like so uncomfortable. I'm sure I spoke beautiful German and said like the
Yeah.
right stuff, but
Yeah.
like the fact that I can understand it just was like, this is an odd
Yeah.
area.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of strange stuff out there. Like you were sort of saying, like we people also make weird videos with Tella today, yeah, we need to figure out and keep a handle on that. And then yeah, AI is gonna kind of make this whole thing a bit stranger. One thing I've sort of thought about as well is like um I don't know, living in the future a little bit is like if you control if you control the source of the footage, you then have this ability to sort of say it's verified, real person in a way, or like this is the source. So it's like if you can watch if you create on Tella and distribute on Tella, like we can basically say, yeah, this is legit. This is you. This is from that person because we have the whole end-to-end process, and that's
Mm.
sort of something I've thought about a little bit as well. There still is the like, oh, what about if someone uses like a webcam filter and they can like probably, there's still ways to do that, but like you have if you can control more of the end-to-end creation and distribution, then you have a chance to be able to say like this is legit or this is
Presumably, there
me.
would be a way as well, like if someone was posting on YouTube, for you to like sign it on behalf of YouTube and you guys would be like, "This is really interesting. I hadn't thought about that angle before. That's
You could
cool.
yeah, you could like
Gives me hope."
yeah, you could direct publish from Tella, like would then kind of give viewers on YouTube the trust that where it's come from. um it's not foolproof in terms of trying to like ensure um yeah whatever this is, combating deep fakes or whatever, or but there's something about having owning the full process that probably offers some advantage compared to like yeah, a fragmented process where you record with one tool, you edit with another tool, you publish somewhere else, and there's no sort of connection between those steps. Then yeah, you can get all sorts of crazy remixes and appropriations and things like that. Um, yeah.
So I'm just thinking about rounding off the section on design here. This is not necessarily a question about the future of the platform and features and all that stuff. It's more about the design side of stuff, like how you actually like think carefully about product design and constraints, as we were talking about earlier. So I'm interested in like what's the new designer starting to think about, or what are you talking about with the new designer? Like how are they thinking about the product? Again, with this idea of constraints and like it makes me think a lot of like Glide. Like in the early days, like Glide was always about being easy and fun, and like then we were like, no, the main thing that we need to focus on for now is power. And the in the early days, we used to look at like other products and be like, oh my god, like that software creation tool is so complex, like people won't, that's not our mission. And now there's a certain level of complexity for what we do. I think we've done it in really, really good ways. The UI is like one of the things that everyone compliment people on, but there are many sort of like avenues in Glide that you can end up in like sub menus or whatever, where you're just like, if you're a new user and you were dropped in there, you wouldn't know where you were and you wouldn't have context. And it's just this like age old thing about like a tool that gets more power becomes more complex. And like, how are you and this designer thinking about it? Is there anything that they're going to like revamp, or is it all in a good state right now?
There's aspects that I wouldn't say anything is like a total revamp. I think some there's some more like design nerd areas that we're sort of lacking consistency and certain strange patterns because I've quickly done it or whatever. There's on the topic of complexity, we're regardless of whether we rethink a video editing feature and bring it into Tella in this more simple, elegant way, like we've always been trying to do, that will also kind of like we'll sort of hit some limit of that where cool, we've got all these simple video editing features, but there's a lot of them, and now you have this kind of complexity or whatever. So that's always going to be. It's not like we can avoid complexity by selectively choosing which video editing features we sort of bring into Tella and how we do them. It will still exist. I think what's important is that it goes back to I don't know if it's like a design principle or whatever, but it's like Tella should be easy to adopt and but still give you this sense of mastery there as well. So like you should be able to just like come and record, like if you're 80% of users, you should be able to like come and record and create something great, like almost out of the box. But then power users should have some depth to be able to explore and feel and make it their own and feel like it's part of their workflow. And we sort of have that now, I guess, a little bit organically, but making sure we still do that. Like we have a ton of users that just use us truly as like Loom replacement, super quick, very limited editing type videos, and that's awesome. And then we have people that make 3-hour long YouTube videos of coding tutorials, and like they have like 100 clips in the editor, like mammoth things. And so are those two different customers and need two different tools? I don't think so. I think we can. I think we can support them all in there, but we do need to be more deliberate about making sure that like both of them feel comfortable in the app, and when creating videos with Tella, and it probably is going to come down to like, cool, you can jump into Tella as your first experience, get to the grips with most of the product quite quickly and feel a sense of accomplishment very, very quickly, but you can go deeper and you can integrate it into your workflow, and it's going to feel like your tool and not just just Tella. So that's I'd say like the theme that me and this new designer are going to be thinking about a lot. More specifically, right now, yeah, he's focused on our new AI auto layout editing feature. That's the main thing at the moment.
Have you guys checked out or used Jitter at all?
Yeah, yeah. I've used Jitter for a long time. Jitter were in the YC batch, like maybe a couple years, a couple batches before us, or the year before us. And they're based in Paris. So this, I don't know, in the early days where there was slightly less European YC founders, there was sort of a bit of a gravitational pull there. But yeah, Jitter are awesome. I was just using Jitter yesterday to work on a new
I
little.
think Robbie's coming on the podcast at some point.
Great.
Just need to
Yeah.
organize it. I saw him the other day at like a meetup thing. So
Yeah, cool.
I love the way that they've approached it. And it just, the reason I thought about it is when you said like, I can't remember your phrase, but you said like, you come into the product and get an immediate sense of mastery. And I was thinking about that word. It's like a classic, really tricky thing, isn't it? It's like you want to give people the power, but simplify the way that they have that power. And it's just like so hard. Like the opposite of this would be like After Effects. I'll let you toggle everything and you have mastery. No, not quite. Like, and then the other end of the spectrum would be like, well, if you don't mind, I'll use an aspect of the tool which isn't there right now, which is like easing. Like for me, like I can come in and I can get easings like so quickly, but I'm like annoyed because I can't like dial it how I want.
Yeah.
But I don't want the complexity of After Effects, and it's kind of tricky. And Jitter do this like so well. So I was interested. Are there any other products that you feel like you draw a lot of inspiration from? They don't necessarily need to be video tools, like in terms of product design.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a more fuzzy abstract sense. I really loved what and like lots of people loved what Arc at the from the browser company was like. Things are changing there quite dramatically in real time at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was something about the personality they put into the product that just made it feel different and fun without like it being distracting from the stuff that you wanted to do. And I don't know if I don't think we're comparable in that sense, but that's something I've envied and want, where they've just like found great moments to inject some fun and personality and something memorable. Um, Especially into the fact that it's kind of like a browser or a desktop app. I think you see that kind of attitude a lot more in mobile apps, and you see maybe less of it in the sort of vanilla B2B SaaS kind of saturated world of desktop and web apps. So yeah, that was something I looked at a lot. And then what else is interesting lately? I guess from an aesthetic, also from an aesthetic sense, I like what Framer is what Framer is these days. Again, they have a lot of complexity. Um, you're trying to design websites, but there's an elegance to it where it still feels relatively simple. I like the sort of the visual aspect of Framer. That's something I've looked at a lot at. Um, Yeah, those are the two that come to mind at the moment. Is there anything on like like to look at mobile apps and see if there's anything that see what mobile apps do, because I feel like there's yeah, nothing jumps to mind yet. But like mobile, yeah, it's the constraints thing on mobile. Like it's fun that they sort of have these constraints and they have these fun interactions where you get to use your hands and thumbs. And when you're designing for web and the desktop, you don't have that, and you sort of I know it's nice to have to think like, what would you do with this on mobile, and then sort of how does that make sense on desktop, or does it get in the way or make it worse?
Or
But
what's the
like,
desktop version of this if you approached a mobile kind of way, what's the mobile version of this on desktop? It's like, yeah,
yeah,
it kicks everyone into a kind of a sort of like another gear of like just a bit more effort, you know? And I think everyone's talking about this in the design world. They were saying it at Config a lot. I was there a couple of weeks ago. It's just like design is just more and more important now. Like the average person is getting more and more savvy to these sort of like annoying interactions. And now that everyone's generating everything, at some point the actual functionality will be okay, but the design will be the next. So I'd love to ask a little bit now about like the back end, so to speak, of Tella, like how it actually runs, because the beauty of the experience for users is much like Figma, that it's just all behind the scenes. And like as a video producer, like that's just a very welcome experience, because just so much of the work of producing a video is what I call, like, I don't know, pen pushing or file pushing, right? It's just like moving that there, putting that in there, making sure that that's leveled. So the more of this that you can handle, the better. And what you're doing so well right now is, as we were speaking or alluding to earlier, is like the speed of upload and capturing of like potentially quite high quality assets. I've got my DSLR here for Riverside and it does it well, but Tella does a pretty good job there as well without compressing it too much. Um, I'd love to get into that side of stuff, perhaps for recording. Then maybe we can talk about the rendering side of stuff, like the publishing and how that works.
yeah. Um, I've mentioned a couple times like this idea of record, edit, and share as the sort of like as a sort of structure that we think about a lot, um, and that applies here as well. So like in trying to like compress each of these steps down to where it's minimal effort, no effort, and certainly minimal waiting time, where in other tools you'll find that. Um, yeah, that also applies here when it comes to the technology. And the first place we spent a lot of time on this was the recording. Loom Looms was famous because you could record and like it was uploaded instantly in the background, and then you could like share the video right away. And we wanted to offer the same experience, so we spent a long time um, and a lot of focus on trying to get a really great uploading experience. For us, the challenge is that we were uploading for the most part two separate streams of footage, and oftentimes it's quite large files if you're recording with like a nice camera. Um, and yeah, now for the most part, like you record in Tella, it's like uploaded in the background. We break it into smaller parts, and then it's ready to be worked with in the editor. So that was the first
Just
area.
without, I don't want you to rush on too much there because that would be really interesting for people who don't know about it, which is me. Like breaking out a video recording real time and then piecing it back together. It reminds me of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or something like that, where you like, Mike TV goes from one place to the other. Like, um, like what if you have a bad connection? Like what's going on there? Like a really slow connection. Like maybe you
Yeah,
could just talk us through it bit by bit, like
yeah,
what actually happens.
yeah. We don't have any like offline mode. You can't save televideos offline.
And it's not even so like right now I'm in Riverside Studio and it's like a local recording which is uploading. Again, it's over my head a little bit.
It is. So it is that, and still in principle. There's just no like permanent record of it offline. You can't create a permanent record of it offline. So if everything's going good, we're like storing a chunk of data on your computer for a short moment in time, and then like uploading it to the servers instantly. If you have a bad connection, then the amount of data that remains on your computer that fills up that temporary storage is going to be more, and then it will just keep trying to upload.
Just again getting really more nerdy here for the video producers who don't know about like development. Like where is that being stored on a Mac? Like
Yeah, well, if we started out with Tella being a browser app, we had no um, desktop experience, and so the browser provisions a bunch of storage on your hard drive that it has access to, and so we would use that so it was still stored on your computer, but it's like via the browser, what the browser is allowed to fill your computer up with, and lots of apps will use will use the various browsers equivalent access to that. Going a little bit nerdier is like I don't know where it's at today, but in the early days, um, there were some pretty big differences between the browsers and like the amount of local storage they had access to. Chrome had loads, and so never really needed to worry about that. But like Safari didn't have much, and I feel like Internet Explorer maybe had less. Firefox, I don't remember, but like all browsers were not the same in terms of their like ability to like have a decent access to your local storage. It also depends on OS. So like I think Chrome on Mac had the best, and then various browsers on Windows. One of the browsers on Windows was like the absolute worst, and there was not much that we
it's
had
so interesting.
access
I've
to.
always wondered why Riverside asks, or at least used to
It's
ask, like
this. It's
only
that.
go on Chrome. Yeah, it's this. Okay.
That's totally it. I think they could probably. I don't know what their policy is today, but like they could probably they could probably do something with the other browsers now. But we had the same. Also went through a similar thing. It was like, do we need to make Tella a Chrome only thing? It's not, but in the early days there were some pretty noticeable differences in the worst scenarios between the browsers. On with our Mac app, it's way better. You can the browser is a middleman, and you are just like at the mercy of what the middleman has for you from the source. When you build natively, you can bypass all that stuff, and have a lot more control over it. So yeah, now with the Mac app, we have our own Mac Tella temporary folder on your hard drive, direct access to the hard drive, and we can use that to store the video. You can go fully offline, shut down your Mac, no connection for ages, and then open it back up, and we'll just like finish the uploading of whatever is left there. So yeah, you can you can relax. You can generally relax around internet connection and the risk that poses to your video now.
And so then all those files or all of that data is then in some cloud provider that you guys use or sort of platform. Maybe you could speak a little bit to how that works, just for non-developers, just to
Yeah.
give a bit of context.
Yeah, I mean, Teller's infrastructure is for the most part all on AWS, Amazon Web Services. So, yeah, it's yeah, it's in their database basically.
And
Um,
video is like notoriously huge, like
yeah,
massive.
yeah.
Is there any accommodation like with like what's the approach there? Like most people who are using AWS are not uploading video, right? Um,
Yeah, so video when people sort of ask about this or we talk about this, like I think people tend to think like, oh, videos are much bigger data type, and so that must be expensive. But the storage of it is relatively trivial. It's the movement of it and the conversion of it, and for us, it's the rendering of it. Those are the expensive parts. The storage is relatively negligible. We have a ton of videos stored, but like that as a cost is, I think, storing video as a cost, at least in
so
terms
it's
of
the
like
actual
development
like
infrastructure.
usage rendering of it both in the editor and the rendering of it both in the export.
Yeah, it's a playback of video, like distributing it around the world wherever people are watching it. Like there's a big chunk of cost there when it comes to needing a content distribution network to serve the video, and then the rendering is the actual generation of the various bits of raw sources of video. So the camera, the screen, the background, the multiple clips, all of that stuff. That process there, that's the more significant thing for us that we pay. I mean, that's where we pay a lot of attention to. The storage, need to keep an eye on, but it's not a critical thing. I think storage of video, even with the biggest levels, is a relatively solved problem in terms of like that being a major concern. Maybe in the early days of cloud storage and computing, which long predates me, is like that might have been a much more you might have had to pay much more attention to that and think and do a lot more fancy
It's so great
and
to be
tricky
living
things.
in this future now. I don't know how many years I've like wondered like when will it be easy to just upload loads of video and have it all online. So it's just great to be at this point. Just I know you need to go soon, but there are a few things I just wanted to ask about as well about the platform. Like so motion is an area that you guys aren't like super focused on right now. I know you said something about like you haven't brought titles to it yet, but like obviously that is in your future. And already right now you're doing things like drop shadows, like rounded corners on a frame and things like that, and other stuff which I can't remember or I don't use, like the backgrounds and stuff. Could you just give a high level of like what tech you're using there? Like, is that a solved kind of like thing in software development? Like, did you have to invent some stuff there? Like, we're seeing this more and more now, like sophistication of motion and all of the things that you expect in a tool like After Effects or Cavalry, uh, in the cloud. And it just fascinates me, like how people do that.
Yeah. So our editor is dumb is the wrong word, but it's simple. Like our web editor is simple. It's just HTML and CSS. So when you're interacting with our editor, whatever you can do with HTML and CSS, even this the simple stuff, but also the more fancy stuff, like that is what we will like then kind of offer right now. So like if you go into a Tella file and like open up the inspector and like select the camera layer on the editor, you can change the drop shadow style, if you want, and like that's what you're interacting with there. So whatever you can do on the web, like in the editor, like that's the sort of scope of
Okay,
what we can
okay,
do.
that's really interesting. Yeah, okay.
In theory, there are still some limits there and some performance things that we think about a lot. And like there are other web technologies where you can get much closer to more like proper graphics based rendering that offer more performance and give you more fine control over things and better effects. And so that's a change we sort of are thinking about somewhere in the future. In terms of rendering this and getting this into the final video, that's where there's a little bit of magic on not many magic, but yeah, that's where we've kind of had to spend a bit more effort to like make sure we can get what you create in a very web native context to just be what you get in the video. So lining that up with our rendering pipeline yeah that's another area where we have focused a ton on in the past and continue to focus on. Anytime we add some new kind of style or effect or sort of step in the editing. We've got to make sure we are getting one-to-one with the whole rendering, the final rendered output, and the rendering pipeline is still as performant as it possibly can. Um, but yeah, that's where a lot of our engineering effort goes
Yeah, the
into.
speed that recently that you made some improvements of both the editing experience with the kind of lower quality clips and then the export stuff is so impressive, and I wish we had time to kind of like dig into the nerdiness of that, but I want to just yeah.
I was just saying on the low quality version was a funny one because like we don't do it. We haven't done a great job of like we've done a relatively quick version of this to kind of just so people were just like, guys, like fix this, like this is breaking, like we can't
That's the
edit
right
long
thing to
videos
do,
anymore.
yeah.
And so we're like, okay, cool, we'll just put a switch on so it makes it low res. We want to be smarter about that so that we can just like, if we know it should be low res so you get the more performant experience in the editor, we should just figure that out for you. We haven't quite gotten there yet. But yeah, that again, it was really like there were people just editing these massive videos, or like massive in terms of duration, but then also just huge video files, 4K streams in the browser, and we're like how, like what are you doing? But we're like, oh, we let people record that size, and we don't have a recording, a meaningful recording limit on the duration of it, so of course this is going to happen. So yeah, that was the sort of origin of that. It was like there was like 2 weeks of customers just shouting at us, being like, "I'm trying to do these things," and we're like, "What are you doing that for?" But we're like, "Oh, these videos are pretty sick." Like so we have to, there's it's great when customers just kind of like, "I'm trying to do this crazy thing," and then it's not supporting it, and if you can kind of get them over the line like that, that feels great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we spoke about record, edit, share, record and edit of the platform. There was one last area I wanted to ask you about was the sharing side of stuff, like, and maybe that could lead into talking about just like the future of the platform. Like, I've resisted sort of pushing any of my feature requests in this entire interview, and it's been very hard. So I hope you appreciate that.
Yeah.
But is the only one that I will say, which is relevant here, is about like publishing to other platforms.
Yeah.
Obviously that's probably on your radar. Like, it'd be interesting to know how soon and how much of a priority that is with other people, because that is like the biggest time sink for me. Like, Riverside published to Spotify, but then there's like YouTube. There's repurposing I want to do. Tella is the same. And then maybe this could like lead into a conversation just like about like how you see Tella fitting in automation in general as well. We could talk about
Mm. So YouTube, direct to YouTube is sort of like the big one that we think about and customers bring up in terms of like a platform where people need their videos. There are two ways that people share Tella, and it's about a roughly 50-50 split, where people will just grab the link and like we are the distributor for the video. You watch it on Tella on a view page. And when it comes to publishing there, like it's really about, does the other platform have like support for the way we do embedded, our embedded player? A bunch of platforms do have that kind of out of the box. And then for the rest of the world, it's about knocking on the door and being like, please support our links. And Glide were one of the good ones there, where we reached out and you guys added support for our native player inside of Glide apps, which is great. But so we just have to kind of like, that process is never going to end until we're sort of at, I don't know, Loom. In Loom's case, Loom is like a household name in this regard, and so every platform that like builds like some video embed support, they're like YouTube, Loom, and Vimeo. And so we need to get Tella onto the sort of like default list of video apps you need to support. Not quite there yet though. The other 50% is taking it out of Tella and then like to some other hosting or distribution platform like YouTube. And for that, we've always sort of said like, let's just build the fastest exporter we can, so that we minimize like that whole process as best we can. But the next step really is like avoiding the other half of the process, which is sure, we've got the fast export, but then you have to upload it to the other platform and you've got all that stuff to deal with. So yeah, direct publishing is something we have penciled in for the second half of this year. We've done some initial looks into this. YouTube is the top of the list, and then there's, I'd say, a pretty long tail of other platforms where our videos end up. So we should be able to like, the one thing that stopped us doing this in the past, when we had an earlier version of the exporter, it wasn't as fast. Was like, we asked people like, how much time would you save if you could directly publish from Tella? And they're like, I don't know, I spend like loads of time like in YouTube and like working on my description and all this stuff and
Yeah, but you
everything.
could do that, couldn't you, with all of the language model stuff? Right.
And I think even Descript has this now where like when you publish,
Riverside
you
has
can,
it as well. Yeah.
yeah. So like we that's now probably something we can just give people. But back, I think a couple of years ago, they were like, I got to do all this other stuff. It's no big deal that I have to download and export. You're only going to be taking off like this much of the total workflow, rather than, you know, what we have in our heads, which is a much bigger impact. And so we kind of like parked that for a little while. And it's been one of those things that people get by without, for the most part. But I think as yeah, to just keep growth going, like it's a necessary thing to just kind of make getting people's content out to these platforms that extra bit easier.
I would argue that it might be like the same level of like quality of life as the stuff we talked about with the recorder. Like that,
Okay.
you might, like, before you did the recorder, like oh, fine, like you have to wait for this, or you have to do that, or you have to
Yeah.
click on the menu
Yeah.
bar to do stop. Like, fine, whatever. But actually, like, when people experience it, whether they're conscious of it or not, like, that little micro interaction is
Yeah.
just so much value. That's my pitch.
So are you? But so my then turning this into a user interview. Are you direct publishing from Riverside into YouTube or other tools
They
like?
don't support that yet, but
Okay.
Spotify, yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. Okay. Right. And is there? What does that feel like? Does that feel like you're like, cool? I'm like,
Well, the podcast ends up being, even though it's like annoyingly compressed, I wish this is another topic as well, like, because Tella does a thing as well, which is like highly compressed, which makes sort of a noisy thing. Like, even though it's that compressed, like, it's still like 3.5 or 4 gigs,
mm,
like, when you download it. So,
mm,
like, the slowness of sending that like down and then back up to Spotify, and I don't know what's happening with the download and upload process to even reduce quality further. So the idea that, like, essentially Riverside servers and YouTube servers are just Spotify servers are just like, yeah, cool, that's so much more relaxing for me, and it's just a process that I can close my laptop. Um, and like, again, it just, yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say there's no. What I always wonder is like the idea of kind of like, do you get like a do you get like a staging area where you can kind of preview what is going live, or do you ever worry about like, oh, it's
Yeah,
live now, like
yeah. Spotify for podcasters gives you all of that, where you write the show
okay.
notes, description, and things like that.
Yeah.
You can schedule it.
Yeah. So,
You can
so it
preview it.
doesn't feel like you're just like throwing something out there and hopefully it's got everything it needs, but you still
Yeah.
feel fully in control of the publication. It's not
But
like you.
also with YouTube, it's like you always upload unlisted, and then you go there and you
Yeah.
check.
Okay.
Like, you're never gonna trust.
Yeah.
I would never trust a platform to just send it straight. Well, maybe I would. I tell a lie. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, okay. That's a good point. But yeah, to round on that, like this is something we have to do at some point. Yeah, YouTube will be the main focus though.
I have a sort of non-question here, which is about automation and agents, and like, how you see video in general, and I guess more to the idea of Tella as an internal communication tool, like how you see video in relating with like this rising wave of agents and stuff like that. Like, if right now we're like prompting an agent or whatever like that, do you see a future where like your video message is like going into some pipeline, or maybe some other stuff? I don't really have a good question here, but like, is there
Yeah,
anything in the world of automation and video that you found interesting or you're thinking about?
I don't think there's anything I'm actively thinking about, being completely honest. But I do remember thinking when Loom launched this feature a couple months ago or end of last year maybe, which was like where you could record a Loom and then it would become a gyro ticket or something like that. Like you could just record, there's some connection there between like pulling out of the video like the necessary bits of information that then you could like turn into Jira, and there's some integration there that would sort of cut the step out of like I record I make the ticket and I record the video and I make the ticket and then I connect them together. It's like you could just have that like done in one go because there's so much context that you can pull out of the video that then like with a few extra pipes, you get that bit done. And I think what they've been thinking about, I haven't checked recently, but I just remember seeing a wave of updates a while ago that were in this vein, and I just remember thinking that makes sense, like for like internal collaboration and some aspects of internal communications. Like there's so much that like can video can be very, very low friction for like capturing certain types of information because you don't have to go through this like mental exercise of like turning it into something relatively concise. Like you were saying, like I didn't have time, so I wrote a long email or whatever it was. Um, I think with video, like you can just riff and people do riff and then the show stuff and they're like they've now captured what it is, but sometimes that like puts a lot on the person to like process because there's a lot of this information and they're kind of freestyling and whatever, but it's very easy for the person to create. But AI means that you can probably pull out the relevant stuff out of that chaotic, unstructured kind of demo or reproduction of a bug or showing someone how something works and turn that into something quite structured that then, a person can consume or another bit of software can consume. And that's really smart. I think that's yeah, there's a lot of interesting things there. It's not, it's sort of in and around what we are focused on, but our focus and thing that we're trying to figure out for the next little while is how do we help people be more creative, communicate better, share interesting ideas and stories. That's still the problem we are spending most of our time on. I think with the Loom, because they don't have this sort of creative starting point and have never really gone into that area, they are now looking at video as this much more functional kind of like connection between people and within the workplace, and that makes sense. And I think there's a lot of interesting things there for them to do and figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, what you just said there made me think about the two opposing things that we had earlier. Is like real person or AI gen person. And actually, like, one of the beautiful things about working with language models, especially right now, as they're getting more and more nuanced, is the reflection back of what you've said in a sort of more more integrated way in many ways. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that's what I meant. And I can imagine if you where like you do that spitball for 20 minutes and then you get like mostly you back with a few bits, which are you, but like AI gen you that feels right. That
Yeah,
would be amazing. That would be
yeah.
amazing.
We looked at this a little bit. We were kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole, kind of seeing what's interesting with AI avatars. And we wondered if that like just connecting bits together, like we're saying with Descript, and they sort of came up with that way in the early days of being able to like overdub with your voice, and like that's amazing. I think I don't think anyone's done this super great yet, but the overdub of you to fill in like gaps and fix things that you don't have to re-record or whatever. I think that's going to be a cool
It looks like a
cool.
badly dubbed movie at the moment, like one of those old martial arts movies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With mouths going totally different. Because like I think as well as like if you can do that sort of one shot or without needing to like, if you can just bake that into the editing process based on what you've recorded, like that would be great. So that's something we're pretty interested in.
Yeah. And I can imagine a future just to the point. This is almost my last question of like the sending things somewhere. I can imagine a way that I don't know if this is the best UX, but like where the recorder is like you say like where is this video going? Like it's not going to Tella, it's going somewhere else. Like or send it through my particular editing agent. Maybe I have three editing agents. One's for tickets, one's for YouTube, another one's for internal, and you just go like send here. That would be
Well,
so cool.
the one thing, one extra sort of insight into how we think about our what we're doing with AI editing is like the video is the prompt. There's so much information in the video that like AI knows, like if you make a video the AI knows what it is. They know it's an online course, or they'll know it's a YouTube video. And so out of that, you can say, okay, well, if it's this, this is how I should be editing it, or if it's this, this is the sort of treatment it needs. Like the video just has so much information in it that, like, then whether it's whether it's yeah, whether it's to like prompt an AI to like make editorial decisions, or to like extract information that can be then used in an automation or a workflow or whatever. Like, there's just so much incredible information that, like, humans ultimately have to pass, but sometimes it's a harder process. Like, the thing that I am really bullish on with AI video editing within sort of our use cases, like when you edit a video, and you will know this better than I will, is like, you just watch a video back, you look at the frames, you look at what's going on, and you think, where should the viewer's attention be here? What should I like enhance? What should I hide? What are they doing something weird with their face? Like, and you just go through the video frame by frame, and you just kind of that you're just thinking all this, going through all these making these decisions, and you just work through the video like that until you've like checked all those sort of implicit boxes. And AI can totally do that way faster. And so, yeah, just this is something we're just thinking about a ton right now, and like looking forward to being able to ship and share.
That's great. It's been so fun nerding out. I love this stuff. Last question, which is really just, again, another non-question. Is there anything that I haven't really asked yet about the future of the platform that you're thinking about that would be interesting for folks? Yeah, we've touched on a bit of it, but
yeah, I mean, I think the big direction with Tella, which is still, we're still we still are very focused on today and the short
maybe you could
term.
also say, like, what % done are you? Like, if you can answer that question,
Yeah,
like,
no,
not that there's a done point, but just to give people a sense of where you're. Yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely not done. It still feels like right at the beginning. It feels like we've been around a little while now. We're not the newest kid on the block, but like, it feels like we spend a lot of the first years getting these foundations of video right, and really understanding that, and really doing a good job of that. And now it's sort of like, cool, we've got these building blocks of video infrastructure that we really understand well and do really well. And some parts of it we are definitely on the cutting edge. Now it's like we can figure out how to apply this new technology, AI, in different parts of this, and push this another major step forward to a sort of our vision of like just trying to be able to make the creation process and the whole end-to-end creation process so much faster and easier. And so that's sort of like the next focus, and it feels like we're just bringing this into the product now, but the whole industry as well is still just relative, extremely early. And then beyond that, it's like we still, we're still super focused on screen recording as the core use case, but some of our expertise, these core building blocks of recording, editing, and sharing, and the workflow there, that applies to other use cases really nicely. And I think there are some use cases that where the technology doesn't just nicely apply, but also overlap with our customer base. Our customers are entrepreneurs, marketing teams, smaller businesses, and they're putting out content to their own customers and audiences and YouTube channels and things like that. It's like, well, what other videos are they making? And there are things like podcasts or live streams, which goes another step further. But all of this is where these same video building blocks of video that we've spent a lot of time figuring out overlap pretty nicely. So still very early, but yeah, the future of Tella is not just the screen recording.
Super exciting. Maybe the next time I have you on, we'll be recording this in Tella. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Grant, thanks so much. This has been epic. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is fun. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and yeah, really enjoyed the conversation.